Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. I'm Isabel Wong, a financial journalist who wants to uncover the many Asian stories around us that are waiting to be told. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Amber Lai, a 25-year-old Scottish-Chinese F&B PR and marketing professional who was born and raised in Hong Kong. Previously a dining editor, Amber runs a successful food Instagram page at Following My Stomach. She will be telling us about confusions over growing up as a half-Chinese person and her journey battling an eating disorder. Thank you for being here, Amber, and welcome to Proudly Asian.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
It's a great pleasure to have you because you were one of the first people that I thought of. So I really appreciate that you took the time to chat with us. To be honest, this is a completely new medium that I'm exploring for myself because previously I spent almost a decade in broadcast, but mainly in TV. So a lot of it would be like very scripted and we would always have to look ready on camera. So I'm starting to embrace this medium, podcast, right? Like we could host this conversation behind the cameras and you and I could be in our pajamas and we could be having our pillow talks.
No one will know.
Exactly. So I think to start off the conversation, I think it would only be right for me to ask for a proper introduction because I'm guessing our audience would like to know more about your background. Basically, who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
Well, I think it makes a little bit of sense that I must be a little bit Asian in terms of the name. So I was born and brought up in Hong Kong, but I'm half Scottish and half Chinese. And I lived here till I went to university in England, and I've just been back for a year now. But being back, it's been a little bit different from when I was growing up as you kind of mature and start working and everything like that. So it's been really nice to explore Hong Kong in a new way that I didn't really do when I was growing up here. But I work as an F&B PR and I run my own food blog, which is something that I do in my free time just for fun. And I find it a really good way to kind of explore Hong Kong as well and try everything that it's got. And it's really fun to do.
So in a sense, you just moved back last year, September 2020, right?
Yeah.
And how has it been for you? Because as you just mentioned, it's sort of kind of like a rediscovery of your hometown.
Yeah, growing up as a teenager here, you are sheltered from many things because you are just growing up and you're not aware of everything that's going on in the world. And then you kind of go out, and I went to the UK and I experienced many different people and started working, and then I came back to Hong Kong and I also started working here. So and everything is quite different to some other places I've been to, but I think being older and more mature, I've been able to realize what it's got, which many countries doesn't have. So it's been really interesting to see. And also as I've matured myself and become more self-aware, I kind of see how I fit into Hong Kong more than me just being in Hong Kong, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could follow up on that, what would be some of the examples that you are sort of rediscovering about your hometown, or what became obvious after you came back?
Well, I think when I was younger here, I was just kind of living life and taking advantage of everything that was available in Hong Kong without really appreciating it for what it was. And we also, when you're growing up, you just kind of live off your parents and use their money and go do everything. And I didn't really appreciate, what I was given to me on a silver platter. And then now I'm a bit older and I have to do things for myself. I kind of see all the elements that Hong Kong has. So appreciating, being able to go out and eat foods from different cultures so easily and meet people from every part of the world just by going out 5 minutes. So it's definitely been a bit of a shock in my system, kind of coming back and seeing what's so good about Hong Kong.
Yeah, I can totally relate because that's in the conversations of a lot of expats or like people who have some sort of Hong Kong roots. They would always say, "Oh, this the beauty of the city is always, the safety, right? Like it's possible for girls to walk
Around.
in the evenings at alone, and also everything is just within 2 hours distance, and a lot of the places are completely walkable as well, as opposed to other places around the world. But I want to go back to your background and basically your family. So your mum is Scottish.
Yeah, my mum's Scottish, my dad's Chinese.
Exactly. So how was it growing up with a Scottish mum and a Chinese dad?
Quite funny. I mean, I think a lot of the times people would, when they found out I was mixed, they would always say, "Oh, so your dad must be the white one, your mum might be the Asian." I was like, no, it's the other way around for me. It was really interesting because I did get to experience two very different cultures. With that, though, there's always a little bit of a struggle because to me, especially my parents divorced at quite a young age. So I grew up with two very different cultures, and then those two got separated even more. And because I would spend weekends with one and then live with another, it kind of made it a little bit hard to juggle the two. So my dad being Chinese, I ended up living with my mum as well, which meant that I had a lot more of the Western side when I was growing up. It meant that I lost a lot of my Chinese culture from my dad. So that was the whole thing about me speaking of when I was living here, I was kind of just given and took what was handed to me. And now I'm back and discovering Hong Kong again as an individual myself. I am kind of wanting to tap back into the culture that I think I didn't appreciate as much when I was growing up because I didn't have them, the care to really.
And if I could ask, like, what kind of influence that you got from both of your parents, from your mom and from your dad, what were some of the things that they influenced you the most culturally or personally?
Well, it's not as much for culture, but just my parents' personalities, I think, which influenced me the most. So for my mum, there's a lot of freedom and emotions. And with my dad, it was hard for me sometimes because I took his strength maybe as trying to control. But now that I'm older, I see that was just the way he loved. And that's different. While my mum was very emotional, so it was easier for me to connect with her. And while my dad was kind of always put a hard face on and said, "No, you need to do this, you need to do that," it was more because he was trying to make me stronger. And now that I'm older, I appreciate that a lot more than when I did when I was 16.
I guess a lot of Asian kids could relate to that. They used to wonder about, like, why is my mom forcing me to do this and that? And now when we think about, our childhood, it's probably for the better.
Yeah, definitely. I wish I'd paid more attention when I was growing up to wanting to learn Chinese when my dad was asking me to. And now that I'm 25 and I'm trying to learn now and struggling, I think back and, I should have listened to him a bit more. So it is all these things that I'm just realizing now I'm a bit more mature and aware of people being different and how that's a good thing, really, rather than thinking, oh, they're disagreeing with me. That's not something that I want. That's not how I think. They're trying to push me into something that I don't want to do.
So as you mentioned, you're very aware of the white privilege issues within your family. So now you're more mature, you're more aware of, who you are and what the issues could be. Like, is it going to influence you to approach things a bit differently, or are you going to try to make changes to the situation?
I mean, there's a few ways I've tried to make changes for myself personally, learning Chinese. And being able to be more, obviously Chinese rather than trying to hide that part of my life, which I used to when I was younger. That's a huge thing because I don't want to just be seen as a white person now in Hong Kong. Also sharing a lot more light on Chinese food and, local food and how great it is rather than only supporting international places, as good as they are, of course. I want to make sure people know what's really Hong Kong and what's really, true to the culture we have here rather than just showcasing, Michelin star and fine dining and everything like that.
Right. And I mean I would like to walk back a little bit, like in Hong Kong, in your own city. Do you are you treated as a Hong Konger, you think?
Personally, not really. I think just because I look more white than I look Chinese. And when I speak Chinese, then people know that I'm from Hong Kong. So it really brings me a lot of happiness to be able to speak Chinese now. And when I say I'm from Hong Kong, people really find that, it connects me to people rather than them just thinking that I'm Westerner. So I do like to tell people that I'm from Hong Kong and be able to, make them see that rather than just looking.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. And I mean, it's good that when you start speaking Cantonese, at least they would be, you're from Hong Kong, instead of like, you are a Guai Mui who can speak some Chinese.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like I say to people now, like, I sing lai, which is like, I mean, I might have not pronounced that the best, but saying like my last name is Chinese, and it's just nice things like that, like being able to actually connect with people and say, this is who I am. I'm not just coming back and taking advantage of Hong Kong and not getting involved in the culture here. Like I want to be fully fledged Hong Konger.
Yeah, and you're probably the walking example of all the different Asians or different types of people who could be Hong Kongers, because of course in Hong Kong it's a very diverse city. It's not just like Hong Kong Chinese. We could have South Asians who were born and raised in Hong Kong as well. So you really are one of the examples. But I would say sometimes like people who apparently did not grow up in Hong Kong and don't speak Chinese or don't speak the language, but if they have a Chinese face or Asian face, they would sometimes face the problem of like when they are trying to speak Cantonese, like they would get a look of disgust from the locals. They're like, you look Chinese, but how come you don't speak
Chinese?
Yeah, so
it's like goes both ways, really.
Yeah. So now, despite your racial identity and what others see you, of course, the question is, what do you see yourself as, really? It's a very loaded question.
I definitely think I'm a Hong Konger. Like, I was born here. I was brought up here. I never saw myself coming back, though, just because when I grew up, I didn't feel very comfortable in terms of society here. And I think a lot of that was because I had a little bit of identity crisis of which part did I fit into? Was I Western? Was I Chinese? And then I went away to university. And when I went away, I kind of realized how much I did love being in Hong Kong. And then I moved to London again, struggled with it a little bit. And I came back to Hong Kong because of COVID. And when I came back properly in September, nearly 2 years ago now, that's when I really realized, I was like, no, I do really like it here. I want to give it another go and see if I can make the most out of it now.
Right. So that was kind of when you were in uni or when you're not in Hong Kong, that's when you had this kind of moment of you can't really take Hong Kong out of the girl.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. I would like to talk a little bit more about the identity crisis that you mentioned, because I remember when I was speaking to you previously, you did mention a little bit about how your identity brought you a bit of emotional trauma and confusion, which you did mention. So could you go a little bit more specific into that? What was the confusion that was going on growing up as a half Asian kid?
For me, this was definitely from my two parents' side because they were so different. And like I said, my parents were divorced, so I kind of went in between the two different cultures a lot. And I was a lot closer with my mother as well. So I kind of connected more with the Western side, but I still loved my dad and all my Asian family, but I didn't see them very much and I didn't know very much about them. But I was living in Hong Kong, so they were 20 minutes away. So because I didn't connect with them as much, I didn't really know if I fit in with them. And then also in terms of society, like when I was growing up, when you're a young kid, you're so easily, everyone around you changes how you think of yourself. So when I would go out and I would want to be with Westerners because they were going out clubbing and they maybe had more money, and I got influenced into thinking that that was the life I wanted to live, rather than, you know, being with my local friends who were just having quieter lives and didn't do the things that I saw as fun because that's what I saw on TV or celebrities doing. So I never really knew where I should go or what I should do. And I tried to fit into different groups without really thinking what I wanted to do myself. Mm-hmm. So this identity crisis was always not really understanding if I fit into one, because I was half. I didn't feel comfortable to be just with the Westerners or just with the Chinese, because I wasn't Western enough to be Western and I wasn't Chinese enough to be Chinese. I was always the Chinese girl with the Westerns or the Western girl with the Chinese. And some people say it wouldn't matter that much, but it really did at the end of the day. It wasn't until I went to university and came back that I realized, and I think people matured with me as well, that it doesn't matter so much as long as you are who you are and you stand for who you are.
Yeah, I could definitely relate how you mentioned as a kid, we like who we are or who we think we are would sort of be influenced by how others, see us, right? And you did also mention you were not connected to your dad's side as much, but as a kid, did you ever wish that you knew a little bit more about the other side?
Yeah, it was something I always, and you don't appreciate as well because it's right in front of you. The UK, to me, I wanted to be able to have, the holidays there or the shops there or the chocolate there, because it wasn't something that I could get every day. So of course, going to eat local food with my dad on the weekend seemed boring because I could do it whenever, so it was hard in that sense because it wasn't available to me. So it made me want it more. But yeah.
And now you're 25 and you are more aware of what you want. So what kind of life do you want for yourself? Do you still want to do what most Westerners do, like clubbing on the weekends? Is this something that you still want? Is this still part of you?
I mean, I do still enjoy it, don't get me wrong. But I'm loving exploring Hong Kong more, going to the different neighborhoods, taking my time out and living a bit of a quieter life. I mean, it's still fun to go out, definitely, but it gets tiring too.
Yeah, and you're 25 and it's going to get, more tiring.
Yeah, like I'm loving, especially now it's cooler, like going and walking around and kind of appreciating all the different landscapes in Hong Kong, spending time with friends more.
Yeah, and one of the last questions on your family background as well. Of course, you're half Scottish. Has anyone asked you, you're half Scottish? Like, how come you don't
have a Scottish accent? Yes, all the time. I mean, my mum's lived in Hong Kong for 30 years now. So the only way I'd have a Scottish accent would be from her, and she's just got a typical standard British one. So no Scottish accent for me. I can't even do it when I'm drunk, sadly.
Did her accent get neutralized as she moved to Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing that's interesting as well, because as expats move to Hong Kong, it doesn't matter where you're from.
A typical accent.
Exactly. Like, it doesn't matter you're Scottish, you're Irish or American or whatever. Like, when you come to Hong Kong and you've lived here for a few years, you start getting that neutralized whatever accent.
International accent. Exactly. International kid accent. I think that's pretty much what it's called.
Exactly. And now I would like to move on to your career as well, because previously you worked as a dining editor, and now you are still in F&B as a PR comms professional. How did it all start for you?
So for me, I just had my food blog, which is on Instagram. And I met someone and she knew that I had my blog and I was really passionate about food. And she was looking for someone to start working within dining. And it just worked out really well. So I started working with Nicole Slater at Hong Kong Living, and I'm really lucky that she took me on and kind of gave me the platform I had. So it was a really great starting point. It was all about who you knew and just getting the right opportunity at the right time. So I am really lucky and grateful to have been able to start. And it was a really fun job.
Was there something that really, when you first started and when you got to know the industry, was there something that really surprised you about the F&B industry? Any secrets that you could tell us?
For me, it was really hard when I started because I started in COVID. So I started at a really strange time. I don't think when I started it was normal F&B at all, because in Hong Kong there were so many regulations, and when I started it was literally like closing before 6 and then 2 p.m. and takeout only. So I don't feel like I had a very real start into F&B, because when I started, so with my job I do tastings at restaurants, like they invite you in.
How do you do tastings?
So it was then one-on-one. You would go in by yourself, and then like 6 months in I found out that you actually normally do group tastings, which is with like 10 other people, and that's so scary and intimidating because you're thrown into a room with 10 strangers and you'll have to eat in front of each other and you don't know any of them. So I had a very different start into F&B, I think. Secrets, I can't tell you. They're secrets of the trade. I really couldn't. No, F&B is really fun. It's very demanding. It's very fast paced. I think the most important thing about it is you have to adapt, because it's all about different trends and what, the consumers want and what every restaurant around you is doing. I don't think there's secrets to it. I just think it's about being able to respond as fast as you can. Or if you don't respond, it's being so strong in what you believe that people just come to you.
Yeah.
Which is really hard.
And hangry customers are the worst.
They are hard. And I know, because I am a hangry customer sometimes. So
hangry editor back in the day.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So do you see yourself still sticking around in the F&B industry for long?
I really love it, because you have the chance to connect with people who are very passionate, whether it's the team you work with or people who come in to have your food. I mean, food connects people. It's one of the most important things in our lives. Whether you love it or you don't, you have to eat to survive. So being able to give that to people, but also giving another sort of pleasure with it, it's a really nice thing to be able to do. I don't cook, but what I do, promotes what the chefs in my company cook. So to be able to tell people about that and let people know what we offer and what we do and transfer that information in something that's readable, it's a really interesting job to do.
I definitely agree, because your job is key in terms of storytelling within the F&B industry, because a lot of the times chefs' efforts are very underappreciated.
Yeah,
like people will only judge whether or not the dish in front of them is good or not.
They don't see everything that it takes to
make. They don't see the years of learning and skills that the chefs have put into that dish as well. But since we're talking about dishes, do you have a favorite dish in your F&B career or in your entire life? What's the most influential dish that you could think of?
I mean, that's really hard, because I've eaten a hell of a lot, maybe too much than I want to admit to. But I have two things. It goes back to family, really. One is my mum's thing. We weren't that well off when we were growing up, and she would cook something which she called mess for me, which would be when she would literally put everything in the fridge into a pan and just fry it, and it would look horrible, but it would taste good. And it was just her way of, saying, this is what we've got, and I'm going to try and make it into something great and give it to you. And she literally called it mess. And I love to make stuff like that now. It's something that I still cook. I mean, I don't know if you could call it cook. And something which my yaya would make, he would line up. So most of the time when I'd see, my dad would be to go over to my yaya's house, which is your father's father. And he would cook a typical Chinese meal and line the table with that plastic sheet so that you just, you wrap up all the dirty stuff and you just throw that in the bin.
That's the greatest invention, though.
It's the best. Like the chicken wings, the leftover stuff, you just wrap it up and then throw it in. It's so clean. And he would just line up the whole table, and I would feel really loved and taken care of. And it was how I kind of spent time with my Chinese family growing up.
Nice. And what do you still remember what other dishes that you would get from your yaya?
I mean, he would cook like 4 different types of vegetables for us because he knew we loved them. So we'd get like broccoli, bok choy, choy sum, chicken wings, this really good soup. I still don't know what's in the soup. Like the water chestnuts would float up, or like carrots, bones, rice, plain white rice, but somehow he cooked rice the best. I can't... Like, fluffy. It's so fluffy. And when it's like that perfectly round shape, his rice was just the best. And
Oh
I could
dear.
eat that just with soy sauce, or not even soy sauce.
That's probably the family secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't pass it on to me, though. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. I gotta say, Chinese soup is always the best. Like sometimes when you're having a really bad day, or your throat feels dry, Chinese soup is always the answer.
Because it's so light, but it's so flavorful.
Yeah, exactly. And now a question on Asian food as well. Since you've lived abroad, you came back, you also grew up in Hong Kong, and of course I want to know if you sort of rediscovered the meaning of Asian food, and if you have made any observations in terms of how Asian food is perceived locally and internationally.
This is something I struggled with so much when I went to university, because Asian food in the UK is ridiculous. It's not even Asian, but they will judge Asian food, like traditional Asian food, so much. So I went to university and I was really excited to like share, things with my roommates. And I would say like, let's go get an Asian meal. And they would order, salt and pepper fries, or they would have like char siu bao, but it would just be like red sauce in the middle. And then I would want to order some other things, but no, I don't want to try it. That's weird. And it's like that connotation that different food you haven't had is weird. And I understand sometimes if you don't know about it, you don't know what it is, it's a little bit daunting at first, but it was they didn't want to try. They weren't open to trying, and always just calling it weird or disgusting and negative connotations, rather than just thinking, you know what, this is a different culture. It's not something I've grown up around, but I'm going to give it a go. Like, to me, some British food is weird, toad in the hole. Why would you put sausages in, like a pudding thing?
How about black pudding?
Yeah, but, give it a go. Don't judge it before you try it. It's just because it's different doesn't mean it's not nice.
Exactly.
It just means that, and you don't have to like it, but you should at least give it the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, I do see how like sometimes Chinese food or some Asian food items would be seen as, an item that they would only eat when they're in some sort of like games, or if they're like, okay, I'm gonna YOLO today. I'm gonna try chicken feet.
Yeah.
So, definitely I could relate how, in that sense, I don't know if it comes off as disrespect for the food, because obviously if some people is like, okay, I'm feeling YOLO, I'm going to have Asian food today, and then they eat that. And sometimes that's exactly the kind of food that some people grew up with as well.
Yeah. I mean, like sausages, that's minced meat in a intestine skin. But so how is it any different to, and also, so I was vegetarian for 2 years too. And I think a lot of my appreciation for food changed when I stopped being vegetarian, because I realized I used to be quite picky about meat. And then after I became vegetarian, at the end of the day, if you eat an animal, you should be able to eat any part of the animal. It shouldn't just be like, oh, I only eat chicken breast. If you're killing the animal, you should eat every part of it. If anything, eating the parts that people don't think are as suitable are good, because you shouldn't be wasting parts of an animal if it's been killed. So yeah, it's just different.
But as a general observation, since you came back last year, do you see the understanding of Asian food is improving, let's say in the UK?
Well, I've only been back for a year and I haven't really. I think there's definitely some more with street food becoming bigger. There's a lot of markets and stuff where international people are showcasing more local dishes. So I do think there is slowly going to be more acceptance of different cuisines around the world.
Because my observation maybe from, let's say, 10 years ago, Asian restaurants or in the UK would probably be kind of like a mashup of, a bit of Japanese, a bit of Chinese, a bit of Indian.
Fusion. I mean, there's definitely more markets and street stalls, which helps. And I think with social media now, there's a lot more ability for people to put different dishes and different cuisines online, when before it was kind of, you would go to a restaurant and you would just know what they had and not be able to have any knowledge about it. But now with Instagram, with YouTube, with Netflix shows and documentaries, there's a lot more appreciation for different cuisines and cultures around the world. So hopefully with time, it will definitely get better too.
Exactly. And the kind of work you do is very important as well, because I think there needs to be more Asian professionals within the F&B industry, for example, somewhere outside Asia, because you hear a lot of disaster stories, like branding stories of Asian restaurants elsewhere that's not in Asia, where they just do the branding completely wrong. It's completely disrespectful. I've seen a lot of those examples as well.
And they don't even have someone Asian
Exactly.
working there.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I think you need to be from the country that the restaurant's based in. You can definitely just have an appreciation and have spent your time, trying to learn. But it's that kind of respect and wanting to actually make that authenticity in your food important, which I think those places probably didn't.
Yeah. Or the best tip for them would be to get maybe insights from a local or someone who knows the culture or the cuisine that they're selling. But as a dining editor, I mean, this is the part that I guess might be a little bit tougher, but is important because you suffered from an eating disorder as well. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I came out online a little while ago about my eating disorder, which was a very scary thing because it's something that's very easily judged because of social media and how we represent ourselves. And because I have a food page, I think I was really nervous of if people would understand where I was coming from because I post about all the food I eat. And I think when I explain to people why I got an eating disorder and why my food page is so important to me, it kind of makes sense. So for me personally, I had a very, very strong obsession with food and also an obsession to stay skinny. So I was battling two things which aren't going to be hand in hand, obviously. But to me, it was hard because I wanted to stay skinny, but I was very interested in food. So when I moved away to Amsterdam and I was living by myself, I kind of used my food page as a way, not my food page, but food as a way to explore Amsterdam. So I would spend all week, restricting. And then on the weekend, I would want to go find somewhere to go eat in. And it needed to become a perfect meal because I'd restricted so much in the week. And if it wasn't great, if it wasn't everything I wanted, if I chose a dish and then I didn't like it because I chose it of what was supposed to be the best, I would be so disappointed. And it became this thing that food had to be amazing, food had to be perfect. And then I would post a picture of it because it was so good. And even if it wasn't good, I would try to convince myself that it was worth it because lo and behold, I had calories that were wasted. And I mean, it stems back to childhood really as well, because I was counting what I was eating from such a young age, but I didn't realize that I was doing it. And I didn't realize that it was part of my eating disorder till I went to therapy and kind of admitted all these things that I was doing. And there were obviously red flags that I didn't realize just because I wasn't aware of something that was that big. But yeah, having my food page and having an eating disorder, it goes hand in hand really because it's just something that I was really passionate about. I was obsessed with food. It was everything I thought about. Like every day, all I did was check Google, check OpenRice, check TripAdvisor. Food was the biggest thing that was on my mind. I would wake up and I would worry about what I was eating every single day, where I was going to eat tomorrow, where I was going to eat. Like I couldn't just wake up one day and say, oh, today I feel like ramen. Today I feel like French fries and go get it at the first place I saw. It had to be worth it. It had to be the best of the best. And I got in this negative cycle of food not being able to be something natural to me. And I was stuck in a prison of it. And then growing up, I was always a pretty skinny girl. I knew that, like I'd been told that my whole life and it became part of my identity. And so I felt like I always had to stay a certain shape. And yeah, it was just a very unfortunate deck of cards that were played, but it made me appreciate what I had as well in terms of, being able to explore countries and meet lots of people. It is great, but yeah, it's a very strange topic.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like a very healthy place that you were in.
No, it definitely wasn't.
But did you somehow overcome it, or where are you at?
So taking the dining job for me was a big step because it took food completely out of my hands. So when I came back to Hong Kong, it was probably one of the worst places, lowest beat places I'd been in terms of my eating disorder, mental health. And taking the dining editor job, it was terrifying for me because I wasn't able to choose food. It was terrifying, but it was exciting. And that's a really strange thing about my eating disorder was I felt so happy and thrill of, oh my gosh, I'm just going to let myself eat, because I didn't let myself eat before. It had to be so planned, and I had to work out 6 times a week, 7 times a week to be able to get one meal that I chose. And I'd spent 2 weeks choosing what I was going to have at this one place because that was the best thing. And then having the dining editor job, people were inviting me and I had to go and I had to try what they wanted me to try rather than me having planned it. And
they were just sort of embracing.
Yeah. So it was terrifying, but I just kept on saying, it's for work. And I wanted to, deep down, the little part of me wanted to just eat. And I finally just let it happen. I mean, not finally just let it happen. It took ages and I was crying every night and still working out crazy hours. But it definitely was a push that I needed.
Mm-hmm. And when people learned of your eating disorder, did you hear any comments that were not so appropriate?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people literally how can you have an eating disorder? You run a food page. Of course, not of course. There's lots of people who I'm so happy for them that they are just passionate about food and love and don't care about how they look or are able to have a healthy relationship with food and work out to feel good and eat to fuel their body. But sadly for me, there was a mental problem that stopped that. So many people would say to me, oh, how can you have an eating disorder? You eat for a living. But social media is so fake. You can hide and you can show whatever you want. And for me, I would no one saw that I'd cry every single night, or I would pace up and down and I would work out for 3 hours a day just to be able to go eat one meal. And I would eat with other people. So I would take pictures of what they're eating and post it, or, post pictures from a year ago without people knowing. There's ways you can hide everything you're doing. So there was always an obvious reaction of, how can you have an eating disorder? You literally eat all the time. But alcoholics, they drink all the time and then they go and they have, an outburst, and people don't know what they're doing. They don't know that they're drinking in their rooms and then going out and being happy or being sad or being angry. You can hide it. You can hide everything, which is the sad truth.
It's a very important issue you just highlighted there, because people are just so used to trying to get to know someone on social media and they assume they know everything about that person. But if you could give, some advice from what you went through. For example, if someone happens to have a friend or a family member who's going through an eating disorder, what would be your advice for that person? How can we support that person?
I think the thing that I always went back to is that the feeling of discomfort is temporary. And every day I reminded myself, when I was crying and I felt my tummy and thought to myself, well, you're so fat, you shouldn't have done that. You don't feel comfortable right now. I feel anxious with this. It's temporary. Whatever you feel today, it can change tomorrow. It can change in 5 minutes. It can change in 10 minutes. Tomorrow, you'll be a little bit stronger. Tomorrow, you'll feel a little bit better about it. And just remind yourself that emotions are temporary. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And now, thank you very much for sharing such a personal story of yours to help our audience learning a little bit more about eating disorder. But now it's time for us to move on to the next segment. And with that, let us go to Rapid Bias. And in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they have got asked at some point in life, and some common biased questions that Asians get asked a lot. So are you ready, Amber?
I think so.
Okay, let's get started. First question. Amber, you don't look that Chinese. You're not proper Chinese, though.
I mean, I'm fully Chinese. I've lived in Hong Kong my whole life, and just because I don't look it, it doesn't mean I'm not Chinese. My last name's Lai, and yeah, that's it.
But your sister looks more Asian than you.
Luckily, with genetics, people can look different ways, and we're still part of the same family.
So you run a food blog. How can you be so skinny if you eat all the food?
You know, I don't have to finish everything that I take pictures of. There's something called sharing, and there's something called leftovers.
And look at your blog. How can you have an eating disorder?
Sadly, with mental health problems, that's a thing. It's all in your mind, and you never really know what someone's going through. So maybe be careful with the questions you ask.
And do you really like all the restaurants that you go to?
I think for that question, it's very personal, and I think it's all about support now. I'm not gonna bash a restaurant and ruin their reputation. You know, you can tell a team their negatives, but we are trying to support and love one another. So I write the nice things on my blog because that's what I want to be.
And do you just go to get free food? Can I be your plus one?
No, you can't be my plus one because it's my job and it is my profession, sadly. But next time, maybe I'll ask you.
And do you eat dog?
I don't personally eat dog, but if it's something that is a wild animal and there's lots of them and you need it for survival, I don't think it's anything different from eating cows or chicken or, you know, things that you buy in the supermarket. So I think people need to relax about Chinese people eating dog.
Thank you so much, Amber. Yeah, I do hope that through this segment we could educate our audience a little bit about how to ask appropriate questions or how or what not to ask, basically.
Yeah, I think all of those questions are things that you shouldn't just, you know, ask someone straight away. Obviously, there's a lot more explanation behind them all, but they're not the most, you know, kind and questions that you would just bang out at a dining table with a friend. But sadly, I have been asked them all many times.
Yeah, and with that, do you have any final thoughts you could share with us?
I would just like to say that being back in Hong Kong and being the age I am and the place I am in my life with, you know, mental health and self-awareness, it's seeing how I fit in, and rather than feeling like I need to adapt myself to better suit other people. And I think that's something that you only get with time. So for anyone who kind of feels a bit confused with where they are, just be patient with yourself and stay true to who you are, and it'll come through at some point. And when it does, it's great.
Thank you for the advice, Amber. I think maybe in the near future, we'll get you back on Proudly Asian and see, you know, where the journey has, you know, led you to and what you've learned.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.